Is it justified anger, legitimate frustration, or pure nonsense? Why is the Tea Party on the rise?
Unless an answer can be given to these people, unless they can be led to understand what's really happening to them, we could be in for trouble.
Noam Chomsky, Who Controls the Message? A Link TV special presentation. Hello, I'm Wendy Hanamura, Vice President of Link TV. I'm proud to welcome you to this special presentation of Noam Chomsky, Who Controls the Message? Noam Chomsky is one of America's most celebrated intellectuals. From his groundbreaking work in the field of linguistics to his commentary on media and politics, Chomsky has been an academic icon for decades. Now, in this timely speech, he takes a look at some of the most important issues facing America today. Whether it's the media's coverage of the Tea Party or U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, Chomsky's critique begs the question, who controls the message? Chomsky answers that question and many more, and we're proud to have him here on Link TV. Now, Noam Chomsky, Who Controls the Message?
There was an article the other day in the New York Times, you may have seen the headline, MIT taking student blogs to nth degree. And a student was quoted in paragraph 2 as saying, MIT is the closest you can get to living in the internet. As you know, there's a great deal of pulling of hair and gnashing of teeth on the part of journalists and journalism people these days about the decline and disappearance of newspapers, the shrinking content of newspapers. Are we going through a phase where so much attention is changing from the traditional means of information delivery to something else that we should be concerned that something vital to democracy is being lost? Or is this just another transformation as we see from time to time over the centuries in the way that people get information from each other?
I think something's being lost. We can all, put up blogs on the internet and express our opinion. It's a good thing, but there have to be foreign bureaus doing inquiry and domestic bureaus. Somebody's got to be researching. Now, I don't necessarily admire the way the major media do it. I think there are plenty of flaws in that. But nevertheless, it is a source of information that can't be duplicated by people at their computers. You can get access to a wide range of information, but even that is based on reporters on the ground, and if they're gone, a lot is gone that can't be replaced.
But nevertheless, the bloggers at MIT, or people in this room, or people listening to us on the radio, now have access to a greater range of contact with other human beings on the planet all over the place, and can get input and information that you have so elegantly written about over the years is filtered out of the mainstream media.
It's filtered out, but contact with people on the ground is not going to replace that. There are many things that are happening right now that are critically important that you can't find in the major media. I could give examples, but contacting people in other countries is not going to provide that information.
Well, let's say suddenly you were knighted as editor of a major media organization. What would some of those places be that you would want to see more reporting done from?
Well, I see you have something there about will Iran get a bomb? Yeah. Okay, there are countries.
He busted me. I read Newsweek.
Yeah, Newsweek somewhere. Yeah. It's a good question whether we could discuss that question, whether Iran will get a bomb. But there are much more important questions. For example, about a week ago, here's something I learned because I was in Mexico. In Mexico, they have an extremely good newspaper, La Jornada, maybe the only real independent newspaper in the hemisphere. They happened to run a wire service report, which turns out is all over the wire services, which has not been reported here to my knowledge, namely that the International Atomic Energy Agency passed a resolution, not about Iran, those are the ones we hear about, usually inaccurately, but they passed a resolution calling on Israel to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to open up its nuclear facilities to inspection. Well, the United States and the European Union tried to block it, and when they failed to block it, they voted against it, but it passed anyway. Well, that's really important news, especially with the hysteria about maybe Iran is concealing something. There was a report 2 or 3 days ago in the Washington Times that President Obama had assured Israel that they wouldn't have to react to this, and of course they rejected it. Now, that's important news. Or on the same issue, is Iran concealing something? There are other countries, nuclear powers, that aren't concealing it, except that it isn't reported here, as far as I could tell. So, for example, the Security Council passed a resolution maybe a week or 10 days ago, which was treated here as a great victory for Obama, resolution directed against Iran. Actually, if you read the resolution, it was directed against the United States, Israel, India, and Pakistan. But that's another question. That you can find out on the internet by looking up the resolution. However, what's harder to find out is that India, a nuclear power, greeted the resolution by announcing publicly and proudly that it can now produce nuclear weapons with a yield comparable to that of the of the United States and Russia. Well, that's quite significant. They're not concealing it. Actually, that, if you really study the internet carefully, you could find. It was reported in the front page, in fact, of the London Financial Times, major business journal in the world. So it can't be that the news bureaus don't know it. And there's more that isn't discussed, and you can discover, but it takes research. All of these countries, Israel, India, and there are 3 countries that have never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, India, Pakistan, and Israel. In each case, their nuclear weapons programs have been significantly aided by the United States. In the case of Pakistan, maybe sometimes called the most dangerous country in the world with some merit, its nuclear programs are a gift to the world by your former governor, Ronald Reagan. His administration pretended that they didn't know that Pakistan was developing nuclear weapons in the 1980s because they wanted to maintain their massive support for the dictatorship of Zia-ul-Haq, who was the worst, most vicious dictator in Pakistan's history, and was also carrying out a kind of a radical Islamization of the country with Saudi and U.S. support. And we know the consequences of that. We're living with the consequences of that. Well, what about India? Israel, I don't have to talk about, it's obvious. In the case of India, you may recall, just about a year ago, the U.S. signed entered into a treaty with India, which effectively authorizes Indian nuclear weapons production. That's what the word. It's not the wording. The wording says that India, though not a signer of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, can override the international restrictions and can gain access to nuclear technology from us, from France, from others. And of course that transfers very readily into nuclear weapons production. So here we have 3 countries that have never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In each case, they're nuclear powers. In each case, they're pretty openly proceeding to defy international organizations, the International Monitoring Organization, the IAEA, announcing that their programs are moving along fast and And in each case, they're supported by the United States. Well, it takes work to discover those things. Theoretically, you could find them through the internet, but with massive research, and that's true for every issue you look at. I mean, you could get around the failure of media to present this information if there were live, active organizations which could work together and find out the information and circulate it, discuss it, discover the backgrounds, and so on. But in the absence of an organized public or many kinds of organization, individuals on their own can't face this.
What do you make of this kind of what Pat Buchanan once called peasants with pitchforks approach to public policy coming from the right in the streets and in the media of this country with a certain amount of vehemence and a certain following as well? There were, I don't know how many people, but it seemed to me from looking at television coverage, maybe a couple of 100,000 people who marched in Washington a couple of weeks ago under various banners of the right. What do you make of this and the implications for small d democratic government in the United States?
I think the implications are dangerous, but and it's easy to ridicule them. Look at the crazy things they say. You want to kill my grandmother, and so on. And there's a lot of nonsense. That's true. But what we really ought to be asking ourselves is why the peace movement, the left, the activist organizations aren't organizing these people. I mean, a lot of what they're protesting is pretty sensible. I mean, a lot of the protests, for example, are against the bailout, the massive bailout. They feel that they were betrayed. They worked very hard to prevent it, and 2 minutes later they got it. And why should the bankers end up from the recession more powerful than they were before, which is what's happening? You can read it in the business press. They're exulting about it. They're more powerful than they were before. The big banks are even bigger than they were. The government insurance policy, the too big to fail insurance policy, is guaranteeing them that they can continue doing exactly what they were doing, which tanked the economy. They can make risky loans and investments. Since it's risky, they'll make a lot of profit. Money coming out of their ears. If it collapses, the taxpayer will come in and bail them out because they're too big to fail. Bonuses and profits are going through the roof, and meanwhile people are suffering. Well, they have a reason to protest that. The tragedy is that the protests and many other things, the protests are being organized by pretty much the same sectors that are creating the crisis. I mean, the corporate money that's behind them is the ones who are very happy that it's coming out like this. And it's a real failure of the activist movements, the left, the peace movement, so on, that we're not organizing. I think that's the question we ought to ask. And there are other things. I mean, there are historical memories that are awakened. You don't want to draw analogies too closely, but there's some similarities which are not encouraging, certainly for someone my age. These people have real grievances. I mean, I have not seen a demographic analysis of, those who call in on talk shows, but I listen to them a lot, and they're interesting. I mean, if you sort of suspend disbelief, you forget about reality of the world, and just listen, it's not a joke. If you listen, the message that comes across has an internal logic to it. It's coherent. It gives answers to people who want answers and need them and deserve them. They're crazy answers, but they're not hearing any others. I mean, these are people who've, worked hard. They're done everything right, Christian, God-fearing, take care of their families, and for 30 years they've been shafted.
But
somebody's got to give him an answer. Why?
Hi, this is Wendy Hanamura, here to talk to you about some of the exciting ways that you can help support Link TV. First, let's take a look at the gift that we're offering during this special presentation. Contribute $100 today and get your own DVD copy of Noam Chomsky's speech, Who Controls the Message? The New York Times has described Noam Chomsky as arguably the most important intellectual alive today, and now is a great time to add his brilliant speech to your home collection. It even comes with an MP3 file so you can listen to the speech on the go. You'll also receive this classic Link TV tote bag. It's a great reminder to those around you that you really care about independent media. The DVD and the tote are yours for your contribution of $100 today. They also make great holiday gifts, so make sure to order now to get them in time for the holidays. We know that you expect more from Link TV. You count on Link TV to bring you the kind of challenging and informative reporting that you just don't see anywhere else. Now we are counting on you to help us keep going strong. Support the media alternative. Say no to the noise and no to the distortions of commercial television. Call us today at 1-866-485-8848 or simply go online to linktv.org/contribute. It takes less than 5 minutes, so why not give us a call today? For a $75 contribution today, we're going to send you this Link TV Canvas tote bag. It's a great tool for carrying groceries and books, and since it's reusable, it's the eco-friendly way to show your support for Link TV. Why not order 2 and give 1 to a friend? It would make a great gift that shows how much you care about supporting this one-of-a-kind channel. These are the kind of gestures that we really need right now. During this winter pledge drive, we need to raise $300,000. This is an important pledge drive for Link, and it's going to help us to continue to bring you can't-miss TV shows during the new year. Programs like The Corporation, like Coca-Cola Case, and the new TED Talks series. So why not make a tax-deductible contribution right now? Just call us. Here's the number. It's 866-485-8848, or simply go online at linktv.org/contribute. While you're there, why not consider becoming a sustaining supporter? You choose any amount that feels right for you, and we take it each month. Just have your credit card ready. It's like buying a subscription for the engaging shows and documentaries that you only see here on Link TV. If you pledge $20 or more a month, we're going to give you this great Link TV baseball cap. For $20, that's the price of a DVD that gives you maybe, 2 or 3 hours of entertainment. When you give $20 a month to Link, you're paying for 24 hours, 7 days a week of powerful content. We want to raise $300,000 during this year-end pledge drive. Now we're counting on you to help us reach our goal and help Link continue to go strong in 2011 and beyond. If you've had a great year and you can help those who can't afford to give right now, consider this. Why not make a pledge of $1,000? It is a hugely meaningful way to give in a big way for this channel. To show our appreciation, we're going to send you every single gift that we're offering during this winter pledge drive. That's over 30 or 40 books and DVDs and all the great Link TV gear. Imagine having all of these great titles as a part of your home collection. Or be a hero for your community by spreading the wealth of information in your pack by donating to your local school or your local library. Why not give some of the books and DVDs as gifts for the holidays? They'd make great gifts for that documentary lover in your circle of friends or family. Order by December 8th, and we're going to make sure that you have them in time for the holidays. Make an investment in TV that you can trust today. Pick up that phone and make your voice heard by calling us at 1-866-485-8848 or go online to linktv.org/contribute. There you can find all the great gifts that we have available during this winter pledge drive. Make a stand for independent media today. Thank you.
The media has always had the function in this country of suspension of disbelief, but that has traditionally been called entertainment. What you're saying is the suspension of disbelief has, we've left Edward R. Murrow behind a long time ago, that firewall between the entertainment, the Jack Benny part and Milton Berle part of media, for those of you who go back that far, and the Edward R. Murrow part of media, That wall has come down, and what you're now saying is that the suspension of disbelief is a characteristic of especially broadcast media in all of its domains, supposed entertainment, infotainment, and information.
So that's happening, but I don't really think that's the main problem. I was not a great admirer of the media in the earlier period. In fact, I think they're pretty awful. In many ways, I think they're better now than they were 30, 40 years ago, because the country is better. It's a more civilized country. The media reflect that. I think I'm not really thinking about the entertainment aspect of the media, though yes, it's significant. I'm thinking about the part that has substantive content, crazy content, but it is substantive. It does give answers. I mean, to people who for the last 30 years have seen their wages, income stagnate or decline, benefits decline, services decline. There's nothing for the children. The world's out of control. These are the people who, on polls, maybe 80% of them, say the country's going in the wrong direction. The government's run by the few and the special interests, not the people, and so on. They're not wrong. This is all happening to them, and the answers that they're getting from, say, Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, the rest of them, are, well, we have an answer. The rich liberals own everything. They own the corporations. They run the government. They run the media. And they don't care about people like you. They don't care about the flyover people between the East Coast and the West Coast. They only care about giving everything you worked for away to illegal immigrants or gays or something. So we got to protect ourselves from them. And furthermore, they run the government. When they put up a health program, it's not to give you health. It's to kill your granny. And that's an answer to something. It's a terrible answer, but it is an answer. And if you do suspend disbelief, you forget about what's happening in the world, really, it's a coherent answer. Now, they're not hearing anything else. And the memory that comes to my mind, again, I don't want to press the analogy too hard, but I think it's worth thinking about, is late Weimar Germany. There were people with real grievances. The Nazis gave them an answer. It's the fault of the Jews and the Bolsheviks, and we got to protect ourselves from them. And that'll take care of your grievances. And we know what happened. Germany in the 1920s was the most civilized, the peak of Western civilization in the arts and the sciences, highly democratic, functioning democratic institutions. A decade later, it was the pits of human history. Again, the analogy is it's not close, but it's frightening. And unless an answer can be given to these people, unless they can be led to understand what's really happening to them, we could be in for trouble.
Well, let me ask you about the trouble that we may be in for as a race on this planet, not just as a civilization in the United States. Your linguistic approach is sometimes summed up as emphasizing an innate set of linguistic principles shared by all humans. Do we also have an innate sense, do you think, of principles, social principles? Are we inclined towards violence? Are we inclined towards fascism? Are we inclined towards democracy? Are we inclined towards anything? Or are those social constructs that can be altered by governments and by media and by general social forces?
Well, just as background, we ought to bear in mind that not very much is understood about these topics. Studying human beings are very complex objects. It's hard enough to figure out what the nature of insects is. And when you get to humans, it's much, much harder. And science has very little to say about this. Some suggestions, but not a lot. However, history tells us a lot. And history tells us that we have all those characteristics. And we've seen it. Again, take Germany. It was the same genes in the 1920s and the 1930s, but they were very different societies. In fact, almost opposite extremes of human possibility. And each one of us, has those characteristics. I mean, every one of us could be a saint, could be a sinner, usually something in between, and circumstances and conditions make a big difference. Now, you mentioned before, let's take something concrete. You mentioned before correctly that the protesters, the right-wing protesters, are denouncing government. Well, where does that come from? Since the Second World War, there has been a massive propaganda campaign, huge propaganda campaign, run by the business world to try to make people hate government. But it's ambivalent, because at the same time, those same sectors want a strong government, powerful state, one that works for them. When they're trying to get people to hate government, they want them to hate things like services that the government provides for the population. But they're not opposed to the government, the powerful government that works for them. I mean, take, say, Ronald Reagan again. He's called a conservative, but that's ridiculous. He was the most protectionist president in post-war American history. He virtually doubled protective barriers to try to protect incompetent U.S. management from being overrun by, at that time, Japanese competitors. Government actually grew on his watch. He was an advocate of big government, but big government that serves the rich and the powerful. And he left the country with a huge deficit, a major crisis, the savings and loan crisis, not quite as bad as this one, but pretty severe. Began deregulation, all in the interests of concentrated sectors of power. He also he sort of pressed forward the program of massive incarceration of poor and defenseless people. Turns out mostly blacks. So the incarceration rate when he came in was approximately the same as Europe, maybe a little to the high end. By the time he was gone, it was out of sight. It increased further under the same tendencies increased under Clinton. They're still going on. But Reagan drove it that way. Actually, and you mentioned something about the internet before. Where'd that come from? I mean, that didn't come from private enterprise. That come from state intervention in the economy. It was Pentagon supported. In fact, it was developed right where I was at MIT. Same as computers, same with lasers, containers that are the basis of trade, microelectronics, biotechnology.
Are you saying technology is value neutral, basically, when it's invented? Or created?
Well, in a sense, it's value neutral, but in a society that had no structure, it would be value neutral. But in a society that has structure, it's not value neutral. But it didn't come, to a substantial extent, it came from a powerful state intervening in the economy and pursuing a program which amounts to, it's pretty close to saying that the public pays the costs and takes the risks and eventual profit is privatized. Well, that's big government. And you can be sure that the corporate sponsors of the right-wing movements don't want to stop that. They want to keep it going, just as they admire Reagan, their saint. Yeah.
Along the lines of what you were just saying, you wrote a number of years ago, we cannot say much about human affairs with any confidence, but sometimes it's possible. We can, for example, be fairly confident that either there will be a world without war or there won't be a world, at least a world inhabited by creatures other than bacteria and beetles with some scattering of others. You made allusion before to your age, your generation. Do you think we've gotten any closer over the course of your lifetime to a world without war, or are we on the doomsday clock ticking mostly towards midnight?
Well, I think there are tendencies in both directions, and the future of the species depends on which of those prevail. So what I mentioned before about escalation of nuclear weapons, well, that's one of many aspects of a tendency towards destruction. On the other hand, we are a much more civilized society than we were, say, 40 years ago.
What do you mean by civilized?
Well, let's take some examples. Take the last election, 2008. I didn't happen to like any of the candidates. But 40 years ago, or for that matter, 10 years ago, it would have been unimaginable, unthinkable that the Democratic Party would have two candidates, a woman and an African American. That's because of changes in the society. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement, the anti-nuclear movement, the opposition to aggression, which is much stronger than it was then, and has an inhibitory effect. Let's just compare. All of this comes out of the activism of the 60s, which is why it's so denounced and condemned. It was making the society more civilized and more democratic, so of course it's condemned. Take, say, aggression. Compare the Vietnam War and the Iraq War. Okay, the Iraq War was bad enough, but it's, I think, the first war in history that was massively protested before it was officially launched. I say officially because we later learned that Bush and Blair had already started the war, but we didn't know at the time. Anyway, it was massively protested before it was officially launched, and that large-scale protest has had an effect. The U.S. did not apply and could not apply the tactics it applied in Indochina. They simply wouldn't have been tolerated by the population. So there's no saturation bombing, there's no chemical warfare, there's no sending 500,000 troops to the country, there's no driving people into concentration camps.
But there were 4 million people who left Iraq under duress. There were several 100,000 who were killed. There were probably several million who will suffer psychological consequences for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's bad enough, but it could have been worse. And Indochina was much worse. And and in fact, in Iraq, though it's not the way it's presented in the media, but if you think about it, the United States had to steadily back down from its war aims. The U.S. government fought tooth and nail to prevent elections, but they were forced to permit them. They had all kind of schemes to make it, let it be run by proconsuls. They were forced to accept elections. They tried to prevent the elected government from moving in a nationalistic direction. They failed. As late as November 2007, just 2 years ago, the Bush administration effectively announced its war aims. There were crucial parts where that the U.S. would have to be permitted a permanent military presence of unspecified scale in Iraq, and that the country should be open to investment, privileging U.S. investors. That's November 2007. That's the Bush declaration, which I don't even think was reported in the press, but you can find it on the internet, which it was the proposal for the status of forces agreement. Well, they had to back down, at least formally. At least formally, there's no permanent military presence. Formally, they haven't rammed through the kind of investment law they wanted. That's pretty significant. Incidentally, the government is not giving up. Obama, we can go into that. But before that, just compare it with the 60s. I mean, in the 1960s, there was so little protest against the Vietnam War that most people don't even know when it was launched. It happens that in 1962, John F. Kennedy sent the U.S. Air Force to start bombing South Vietnam, authorized chemical warfare to destroy crops and ground cover, authorized napalm, started programs which ultimately drove millions of people into what were called strategic hamlets, basically concentration camps, to try to separate them from the guerrillas who the government knew they were willingly supporting. Protest was virtually zero. I mean, I remember giving talks to 4 people in a church, and the minister, the organizer, a drunk who walked in off the street, and somebody wanted to kill me. And that went on for years.
But that's why you and I were involved in things called teach-ins, which is where I first met
But they started in 65 and 66. That's after years of war.
Right.
And in fact, the large-scale protest, which finally took place, was after about 5 years of war. By then, South Vietnam had been destroyed. The war had expanded to the rest of Indochina. And yeah, they were effective, but very late. And in the elite sectors, the articulate sectors, like the media, commentary, there was really virtually never any protest of the war. It was protest on tactical grounds. It was very striking what happened by the end of the war in 1975, formal end of the war. The population, about 70% of the population, regarded the war as fundamentally wrong and immoral, not a mistake. Those are the polls from roughly then. If you look at the liberal commentary in the press, say at the extreme end, maybe Anthony Lewis in the New York Times, he summed up the war by 75 by saying the United States entered Vietnam with blundering efforts to do good. Well, efforts to do good is a tautology. Our state did it, it's to do good. Blundering, but didn't quite work. So we entered with blundering efforts to do good, but by 1969 it was clear that the war was a disaster, too costly to ourselves. That's what you could read in Pravda in 1985, when the Russians were in Afghanistan. But that was considered sharp critique of the war. Meanwhile, the public was way off to the anti-war side.
Well, let's fast forward to now. In those years, we had conscription. We had the classrooms that you and I taught in, full of young men who were having to make critical decisions about what they were going to do, whether to go live in Sweden, Canada, not register for the draft, resist, or go in the military. 55,000 United States military died, some 400,000 were injured, countless hundreds of thousands of more came back with psychological disabilities, which they suffer to this day. Here we are at this time in kind of a perpetual militarized situation in this country, in a perpetual militarized situation in this country, where the Obama administration is now facing a decision, supposedly, about Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. But the protest against that, such as it is an intellectualized one, largely on the internet, to some extent in what's left of the left media. We don't have conscription. It does not reach down into every classroom and every family and every neighborhood, the militarization of this country. Where it does reach down into is the economy, but nobody talks about that.
Well, you're right, but we have to ask, why don't we have a draft now? Well, we don't have a draft because the Army and the Pentagon and the government realized that in Vietnam they had made a tactical mistake. You cannot use a civilian army to carry out a brutal colonial war. Our predecessors didn't use citizens' armies. So the French used the Foreign Legion. The British used the Gurkhas, or in our war, the Revolutionary War, the Hessians. There was a sprinkling. The officer corps might be civilian, but basically mercenary armies. By the late 60s, the top leadership realized they had made a mistake. I don't really think it's because of the effect of the draft at home. I think that's vastly exaggerated. In fact, you were involved, I was involved. The kind of leading edge of the anti-war movement, like say the resistance, it was mostly led by kids who would never get drafted, like theology students or students at the elite universities. If they didn't want to get drafted, they didn't have to. They put themselves on the line. They faced serious dangers, many years in jail, permanent exile. That's not an easy decision for an 18-year-old kid. They did it. It was very courageous. It spread. It had a big effect. But that can't be recognized in the mainstream doctrine. It's dangerous to recognize that people can take honorable, courageous actions on principled grounds. You're supposed to go as far as, say, Anthony Lewis. Tactical error cost us too much. Let's pull out. Actually, that's like Obama. He's considered in the doctrinal system a principled opponent of the Iraq War. What was his opposition? He said it's a strategic blunder. Again, that's the same kind of thing you could have read in Pravda in 1985 and did read. People who said the invasion of Afghanistan was a strategic blunder. We don't call that principled opposition. I mean, you could have found that in the German general staff after Stalingrad. Two-front war is a strategic blunder. What's significant is principled opposition, and that did exist. In the 60s, it still exists. In fact, in the case of Afghanistan, the protest is greater than it was in Vietnam at any comparable stage of the war. You go back to when there were 60,000 troops in Vietnam, conscripts. Protest was almost zero. It wasn't even talked about.
Hi, Wendy Hanamura here again. Over the years, I've come to realize that Link TV viewers are part of a very special community. Each and every one of you are people who care about getting to the heart of important issues. You look beyond borders to get truly global perspectives. You expect more from the media. And here at Link TV, we do our best to give you more. More one-of-a-kind documentaries, more thoughtful programming, and simply more of the world. We can do all of this because we don't take ad dollars. This independence gives us the freedom to focus on issues that we really believe in. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a sponsor. Link TV does have a sponsor, you. It's your contributions that keep us going here at Link TV. So join us during our Winter Pledge Drive today. Give us a call at 1-866-485-8848 or go online at linktv.org/contribute. We're offering some great thank you gift packs. Here's one that includes the program that you're watching right now. Take a look. For your contribution of $100 today, we'll send you a DVD copy of the speech that you're watching now, Noam Chomsky, Who Controls the Message. It would make a great addition to any home library, or consider hosting a screening to share the words of one of America's foremost intellectuals with family and friends. It even comes with an MP3 file so you can listen to the speech on the go. You'll get this attractive Link TV tote bag as well. It's the eco-friendly way to show the world your love for Link TV. That's the tote bag and the DVD for your contribution of $100. Make sure to order now so you'll receive your gift pack before the holidays. It's an ideal gift for that Link TV fan, friend, or family member. Please don't take Link TV for granted, because frankly, although we cut expenses in every single way that we can, we still depend on you to help us stay afloat. So please don't let us down. Just go to linktv.org/contribute today. There are so many ways to support us during this great Winter Pledge Drive. Consider becoming a sustaining member. It's the easiest way to add Link to your budget. You pick the amount that you'd like to give us each month, and it's automatically deducted from your credit card. Pledge at least $20 a month, and you'll get this stylish Link TV baseball cap. Just head over there to linktv.org/contribute and do your part to keep Link TV going throughout the year. Look, we don't get any money from your satellite providers, from the government, or even from private advertisers. So in order to make the programming like this possible, we turn a few times a year to our viewers for support. Now is one of those times. So please, if you haven't given yet, hey, what are you waiting for? It takes less than 5 minutes to make that call at 1-866-485-8848. To make a huge impact on Link, consider giving a generous contribution of $1,000. We're going to send you every single gift that we're offering during this pledge drive. That's close to 40 DVDs and books, as well as all that great Link TV gear. It's a treasure trove of informative documentaries like Plunder and Damage Done, engrossing books like Amy Goodman's Breaking the Sound Barrier. You can even request no gifts, please. That way, every single dollar of your tax-deductible contribution goes toward keeping the cameras rolling here at Link TV. You know, these books